What if Alabama was never actually falling behind, and the country just completely misread this transition? The national media keeps pushing the same narrative. But the moment Cam Newton publicly defended Kalen DeBoer, something shifted. Because right now, behind the scenes, Alabama may be quietly building something that nobody saw coming, and one recruiting battle is about to expose everything. So here's the real question. Is DeBoer actually failing Alabama, or is Alabama simply facing a standard that no coach in America could ever meet? Before diving in, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Every comment gets read, and stay until the end because the real discussion is waiting there. Let's be honest about something right now. The conversation around Kalen DeBoer has reached a point where almost nobody is asking the right question anymore. Everyone keeps debating whether he's good enough, whether he's the right fit, whether Alabama made a mistake. But nobody is stopping to ask whether the standard itself became something impossible the moment Nick Saban walked out the door. And that's exactly where this story starts, because what happened recently wasn't just a sports debate, it was a signal, a very loud one, when Cam Newton, an Auburn legend, a Heisman Trophy winner, someone who bleeds the opposite of crimson, publicly steps forward to defend the Alabama head coach. Something real is happening beneath the surface. That's not a small moment, that's a crack in the conventional narrative. And cracks like that usually mean the foundation underneath was never as solid as people assumed. So before anything else, let's understand what Newton actually said. He was responding to Paul Feinbaum, who had recently made waves by publicly calling DeBoer a bad fit for Alabama. That comment exploded across every college football platform almost instantly. Because when someone challenges the Alabama head coach, the reaction is always massive. The fan base mobilizes, the media jumps in, and suddenly everyone has a take. But Cam Newton didn't just push back emotionally, he pushed back with logic. On his 4th and 1 podcast, Newton made a point that deserves more attention than it received. He said that if Kalen DeBoer were coaching in the ACC, the Big Ten, or the Big 12 with the exact same record and the exact same accomplishments, the national conversation would look completely different. People would be calling him a success story. Analysts would be praising the transition. Fans would be giving him room to build. But this isn't the ACC. This isn't the Big Ten. This is Alabama. And that single word changes everything. Think about what DeBoer actually inherited when he arrived in Tuscaloosa. He didn't walk into a program that needed to be rebuilt from scratch. He walked into something far more complicated than that. He walked into the shadow of the greatest dynasty college football has ever seen. 6 national championships, 15 SEC titles, a recruiting machine so dominant that it redefined what was even possible at the college level. And now, every single thing DeBoer does gets measured against that. Every loss, every close game, every recruiting cycle, every press conference, every offensive series that stalls. That is not a normal coaching situation. That is something entirely different. And Cam Newton, of all people, saw it clearly. Here's something else worth acknowledging. Newton didn't make this argument as an Alabama sympathizer. He made it as someone who spent his entire college career on the other side of the rivalry. Someone who, by every traditional measure, should have been happy to watch Alabama struggle. Someone whose legacy is tied directly to Auburn. When that voice says the criticism of the Alabama coach is unfair, that means something, because there's no personal agenda behind it. There's no reason to defend DeBoer unless the argument genuinely makes sense. And it does. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, because if Newton is right, and there's a strong case that he is, then the national criticism of DeBoer hasn't really been about DeBoer at all. It's been about grief. It's been about the difficulty of accepting that the Saban era is genuinely over, and that no matter who walked through that door in Tuscaloosa, the reaction would eventually look something like this. Because the standard Saban set isn't just high, It's historically unrepeatable in the short term. 6 national championships at one program, a recruiting pipeline that produced first-round picks year after year, a culture so deeply embedded that it became the identity of an entire fan base. That doesn't transfer cleanly. That doesn't hand off like a baton in a relay race. It takes time, adjustment, and a completely different kind of patience than Alabama fans have been asked to show in decades. And patience, honestly, has never been part of the Crimson Tide vocabulary. There's a reason for that, by the way. Alabama fans aren't impatient because they're unreasonable. They're impatient because they were conditioned for nearly 2 decades to expect the extraordinary as the baseline. When you watch your program win national championships with the kind of regularity that Alabama did under Saban, your internal clock gets recalibrated. Waiting feels foreign, rebuilding feels like failure. A 10-win season starts to feel like a disappointment even when, at almost any other program in the country, it would be cause for celebration. That conditioning is real, and it's one of the most underappreciated aspects of the entire DeBoer conversation. Think about this from a purely psychological angle for a moment. An entire generation of Alabama fans grew up never truly experiencing a real down year, never truly experiencing the anxiety of wondering whether the program was heading in the right direction, never truly experiencing the discomfort of a transition period. And now, for the first time in what feels like forever, that uncertainty exists. And the reaction, the frustration, the criticism, the impatience isn't really about DeBoer as a person. It's about the loss of certainty. It's about learning to live without the thing that made Alabama feel invincible. That's a harder adjustment than anyone wants to admit publicly. So let's actually look at what DeBoer has done since arriving. He came to Alabama after building a legitimate national powerhouse at Washington. He took the Huskies to the college football playoff. He won at a high level everywhere he coached. He arrived in Tuscaloosa with a reputation as one of the sharpest offensive minds in the country. And in his time at Alabama, he's gone 20-8 as head coach. The university believed in him enough to extend his contract. That's not a program panicking. That's a program that sees something the outside noise is trying to drown out. 20 wins in a brutally competitive SEC environment, dealing with massive roster turnover, transfer portal adjustments, NIL chaos, and the psychological weight of following Saban. And the conversation is still whether he belongs there. That tells you everything about the impossible standard Cam Newton was describing. Now here's something that almost nobody has said out loud yet. The programs DeBoer has been compared unfavorably to, the ones people point at and say Alabama should look more like. Most of them would trade situations with the Crimson Tide in a heartbeat. The recruiting base, the facilities, the history, the brand, the fan base. Alabama still has all of it. The foundation hasn't crumbled. What changed is the expectation timeline, and that's a very different problem. But there's another layer to this story that changes the frame entirely. And this is where things start getting very interesting, because while the debate about DeBoer's future has been raging publicly, something has been developing quietly in the background. Something that the critics haven't fully accounted for. Something that, if it plays out the way it could, might force an entirely different national conversation before the end of this summer. Alabama is right in the middle of one of the most significant recruiting battles in the entire 2027 class. And the player at the center of it isn't just another 5-star prospect. This is Manson Sales, the #1 wide receiver in America, according to Rivals. Not top 5, not top 10, #1. And here's the part that changes the entire emotional dynamic of this story. Sales grew up dreaming about Alabama. Let that sit for a second. In the modern NIL era, where recruiting has been transformed into something closer to professional free agency than the traditional process fans grew up watching, emotional connections to programs still matter more than people admit. And this one is real. This isn't a manufactured talking point from a recruiting staff. This is a kid who, before any of the rankings and the offers and the national attention, looked at the Crimson Tide and felt something genuine. There's a version of this recruitment where that emotional foundation becomes the deciding factor, where, when all the visits are done and all the pitches have been made and Sales is sitting alone making the biggest athletic decision of his life, the thing he comes back to is the memory of what Alabama meant to him before any of this started. That's not a guarantee, but it's real, and it's something that Ohio State, Texas, and Indiana simply cannot replicate. You can't manufacture childhood attachment. You either have it or you don't. Alabama has it. That matters. Now, let's talk about what Alabama is actually up against in this battle, because the competition here is not soft. This isn't a recruitment where the Tide can coast on history and reputation alone. Ohio State is the first name everyone needs to understand. The Buckeyes have become one of the premier wide receiver development programs in the entire country. Their track record is borderline terrifying for anyone trying to beat them at this position. First-round picks, early departures to the NFL, a consistent pipeline that elite receivers can point to and say, this is where careers get launched. And Sales reportedly has built personal relationships with current Buckeye players, including names like Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Inniss, and Carnell Tate. That kind of peer-to-peer recruiting is powerful. It's not something you can easily counter-program. When a 17-year-old receiver with NFL dreams looks at Ohio State's recent history, the case makes itself almost automatically. The names are there. The draft results are there. The development proof is there. And when those names are also his friends, players he talks to regularly, players he trusts, the pull becomes something that goes beyond what any coaching staff can manufacture through visits and presentations alone. Ohio State doesn't just sell a program. It sells a community of elite receivers who have already walked the path Sales wants to walk. That is a genuinely difficult thing to compete against. Texas is the second threat. Steve Sarkisian knows offense at the deepest level. He's built a system designed to showcase skill position players, and right now, Texas has national momentum that's impossible to ignore. Arch Manning brings a level of attention and intrigue that no other quarterback in college football carries. When Sales visited Austin and spent time learning directly about Sarkisian's offensive philosophy, that visit had meaning. That wasn't a casual stop on a tour. That was Texas making a serious statement. Sarkisian's pitch to elite receivers isn't complicated. It's direct. Come here. Run routes for a quarterback the entire country is watching. Play in a system built specifically to put skill position players in the best situations possible. Get exposure on a national stage every single week. And now that Texas has established itself as a legitimate contender at the highest level, the program can pair that offensive pitch with a credible championship conversation. That combination is dangerous. And then there's Indiana, which honestly would have sounded almost impossible to say in this context just a few years ago. But after Curt Cignetti transformed that program and delivered a national championship, Indiana suddenly has legitimacy it never had before. Geographic proximity adds another real dimension to their pitch, and there's something powerful about a program that just won it all. The energy, the belief, the sense that something special is actively being built. Indiana isn't selling potential anymore. They're selling proof. That changes everything about how a recruit evaluates them. So Alabama is fighting three heavyweights simultaneously, each with a different angle, each with a compelling story to tell a 17-year-old kid deciding where to spend the most important years of his athletic development. And yet the Crimson Tide are still standing in this fight. That alone says something. Now here's what Alabama is actually selling in this recruitment. And this is where DeBoer's staff has been sharp. Because rather than trying to win on pure brand recognition, which still works but isn't enough by itself anymore, Alabama has been making this personal. Receivers coach Derek Nix has reportedly made a massive impression on Sales directly, and what Sales said about Nix is worth paying attention to. He said, "You can immediately tell Nix genuinely wants him at Alabama." Elite recruits feel the difference between a program that wants them as a piece of a puzzle and a program that has built a vision specifically around them. Sales apparently feels the latter. And that kind of individual attention, that sense of being truly prioritized, is exactly what tips these massive recruitments in the current era. This is not a small thing. In a world where every elite prospect receives dozens of offers and gets courted by programs throwing everything at them simultaneously, the ones who feel genuinely seen, genuinely wanted as a person, not just as a ranking, are the ones who stay engaged. Sales apparently feels that from Nix, and that relationship is worth as much as any NIL package or offensive statistic. Alabama has also been specific with Sales about how he fits into the offensive system. Not vague, not generic, specific. Here's where you line up. Here's how we use your speed. Here's how our system creates NFL-ready receivers. Here's what your career looks like after 2 or 3 years in this offense. That is smart recruiting, and it reflects a staff that understands what today's elite prospects are actually evaluating, because today's top recruits are doing more research than any generation before them. They're watching film on the offensive coordinators. They're tracking where previous receivers from each program got drafted. They're calculating target shares, yards per route run, and how quickly starters have been replaced. The information is available, and the elite kids use it. So when Alabama walks in with a specific, detailed vision for how Sales fits into their offense, not a generic pitch, but a real football conversation that resonates in a way that a generic brand-based pitch simply cannot. DeBoer's offensive background makes this kind of conversation possible in a way it might not have been with every previous Alabama coach. This is a staff that lives in the details of offensive design. And for a receiver like Sales, that depth matters. Now let's zoom out for a moment, because this recruitment isn't just about one player, as important as Sales is. It's about a question that has been hanging over this program since Saban retired. Can Alabama still attract generational offensive talent under Kalen DeBoer? That question has lingered. It's been part of every skeptical take, every critical segment, every recruiting analysis that wondered whether the Tide could maintain the pipeline without Saban's magnetic pull. Because let's be real, Saban didn't just recruit, he recruited at a level that seemed almost supernatural. Players chose Alabama over programs with more immediate playing time, sometimes over schools closer to home, sometimes over schools with bigger NIL offers, simply because of what the Saban brand meant. DeBoer doesn't have that yet. He may never have exactly that, but that's not really the standard that should apply. The standard should be, can he build his own version of elite recruiting? Can he develop his own relationships? Can he create his own pipeline? And if Alabama lands Manson Sales, the #1 receiver in America, the answer to that question becomes very loud, very fast. Because beating Ohio State and Texas for the top wide receiver in the country isn't a quiet development. That's a statement. That echoes nationally. That changes the conversation instantly, not just in recruiting circles, not just on social media, but in the way national analysts talk about where this program is actually heading under DeBoer. It would be the kind of commitment that makes people stop and reconsider whether they've been reading this situation correctly. And maybe that's the thing that's been missing from the public debate this entire time. The people loudest about DeBoer's limitations have been operating from a snapshot, a moment in time, a record that reads 20-8 and gets filtered through the lens of what Saban built. But dynasties don't transfer instantly. They don't arrive fully formed in a new coach's first 2 seasons. They get rebuilt, they get reimagined. They evolve into something that belongs to a new era rather than trying to perfectly replicate the one before it. History actually backs this up in a way that doesn't get discussed enough. Look at every major program that went through a significant coaching transition after sustained success. The ones that survived, the ones that eventually returned to competing for championships, all went through a period that looked uncertain from the outside. A period where results didn't match expectations, where the outside world was ready to call the dynasty finished. And then something shifted. The recruiting started producing. The system clicked. The identity emerged. And suddenly, the narrative reversed completely. Alabama is inside that window right now, and the real question is whether enough people are paying close enough attention to see what's actually being built. The Alabama that DeBoer is building will not look like the Alabama that Saban built. It shouldn't. That version was singular. It belonged to a specific person, a specific philosophy, a specific era. Trying to copy it perfectly would almost certainly fail. The smarter move is what DeBoer appears to actually be doing, taking the foundation, taking the resources, taking the brand, and building something new on top of it, something offensive, something dynamic, something that fits the way modern college football is actually played. And here's the piece that gets lost in all the noise. The run game struggled last season. That was real. The offensive inconsistencies were frustrating. Those were real too. Alabama fans have every right to demand better. The expectations that come with that logo are not unfair. This is not a program where mediocrity gets tolerated, and it shouldn't be. The standard is championships. That's non-negotiable. But there's a difference between demanding excellence and refusing to acknowledge progress. There's a difference between holding a coach accountable and refusing to give context to the situation he inherited. DeBoer walked into one of the hardest coaching transitions in sports history. Not just college football, sports. And he's still standing. The roster still has NFL talent throughout. Young stars are continuing to emerge. The staff is actively course-correcting on the areas that underperformed. And the recruiting, when you look honestly at what's happening, has not collapsed. It has remained competitive at the national level against programs with every incentive to take Alabama down. Now here's where everything circles back to the question from the beginning. Is DeBoer failing Alabama? Or is Alabama navigating something that nobody fully prepared for? The reality of life after the greatest dynasty college football has ever seen. Cam Newton thinks it's the second one, and when you really sit with the argument, when you strip away the emotional reactions and the hot takes and the reflexive Saban comparisons, it's hard not to see the truth in it. If DeBoer had taken the exact same program, made the same decisions, posted the same record, and done it all at Penn State or Notre Dame or USC or Michigan, the national conversation looks completely different right now. The same analysts questioning him would be building segments around his potential. The same media voices calling for accountability would be praising his transition management. But he's at Alabama, where the standard never rests, where winning isn't the goal, domination is, where anything less than a championship feels like failure, no matter the context. That's what it means to coach at Alabama after Nick Saban. And the Manson Sales recruitment sits right at the center of this entire conversation. Because it's not just a recruiting battle, it's a referendum. It's a live test of whether this program can still do what it has always done, walk into a battle for the nation's best players and come out with the commitment. Sales will make his decision sometime in July after completing his official visits. That timeline means this summer is going to be intense. Ohio State is going to push harder. Texas is going to activate every angle of its pitch. Indiana is going to make its case with everything it has. And Alabama is going to have to show Sales one more time that the Crimson Tide is still the destination that a kid who grew up dreaming about this program always believed it was. The next few months matter more than people realize, not just for the recruitment, for the story, for the narrative around DeBoer, for the way the next era of Alabama football gets defined nationally. Because here's what the critics keep missing. Alabama isn't quietly falling behind. Alabama is quietly rebuilding. And there's a massive difference between those two things. One is a collapse, the other is a process. And every dynasty that has ever survived a major transition has gone through a version of exactly what Alabama is going through right now. The programs that lost their identity did so because they tried to hold on to the past instead of building toward the future. The programs that emerged stronger were the ones that trusted the process when the outside noise was loudest. The question isn't whether Alabama can return to the top. The question is whether the people watching are paying close enough attention to see it happening in real time. And that's the thing about this moment. The country thought it was watching a decline. It may actually be watching the beginning of something. Something that, a few years from now, people look back at and say, that's when it started turning. That's when the pieces started coming together. That's when it became clear that Alabama wasn't going anywhere. And if Manson Sales commits to the Crimson Tide this summer, that moment might come sooner than anyone expected. The #1 wide receiver in America, choosing Alabama over Ohio State, over Texas, over every other program fighting for his signature. That's not a small development. That's a statement that echoes across every recruiting board, every coaching staff, every 5-star prospect in the 2028 and 2029 classes who is watching how this plays out. Because in recruiting, signal matters as much as substance. And landing Sales would send the loudest possible signal that Alabama under Kalen DeBoer is not a program in transition. It's a program on the way back up. Roll Tide. Now it's your turn, Bama Nation. Do you think DeBoer is being judged too harshly because of the standards Saban created? Or do you believe Alabama should be pushing for championship results right now, regardless of the circumstances? And what about Manson Sales? Do you think the Tide can close this one out against Ohio State and Texas? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The debate in this fan base is always one of the most interesting in college football. And this one is going to be loud. If this video gave you something to think about, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss breaking Alabama news. Because in Tuscaloosa, the story never stops moving. Stay locked in. The best is still ahead.